Everyone remembers Zeus as king of the gods, the one who rules Olympus, the one who commands the sky and throws lightning like judgment itself. No one remembers that before any of that, he was a boy raised in hiding, on an island his own father never knew existed. No one remembers the 10 years of war it took just to earn that throne. This is the story history skips past, the war that made Zeus before he ever became a king. You already know how it started. Cronus, once the son who freed his family from a tyrant, had become something else entirely. A prophecy told him one of his own children would overthrow him, exactly as he had overthrown his own father. So he swallowed them, one by one, the moment they were born. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, each one gone before their mother could even hold them, before she could memorize the shape of their face. Rhea endured this in silence at first, but grief, given enough time, hardens into something else. When she became pregnant a 6th time, she made a decision Cronus never saw coming. She went to her own mother, Gaia, and begged for a way to save this child. Gaia gave her a plan. When the baby was born, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and presented it to Cronus as though it were the child himself. Her hands did not shake, though everything in her wanted them to. Cronus, without looking closely, without hesitation, swallowed the stone whole, believing once again that he had ended the threat. He never noticed the difference. He never noticed his wife's eyes, holding a secret larger than anything he could imagine. The real child was carried away that same night, hidden on the island of Crete, far from his father's fear. His name was Zeus. He was brought to a cave on Mount Ida, deep enough that no sound from inside could ever reach the sky above. There, nymphs raised him in secret. Adrastea and Ida, some stories say, though the names shift depending on who is telling it. What every version agrees on is this: he was fed on the milk of a divine goat named Amalthea, whose horn would later become a symbol of endless abundance, the origin of what we still call a horn of plenty. When the infant cried, as infants do, the sound could have reached the heavens and undone everything Rhea had risked to protect. So warriors called the Curetes stood guard outside the cave, clashing their spears against their shields whenever Zeus wailed, drowning his voice in the clatter of bronze, so that not even the wind could carry the sound of a child who wasn't supposed to exist. Imagine growing up like that, not with lullabies, but with the sound of weapons clashing every time you cried, because your own existence was a secret that could get you killed. Zeus grew up not as a prince, but as a rumor, a child raised by nymphs and goats and armed guards, in a cave on a mountain, hidden from a father who ruled the entire known universe and did not know his own son was alive. He did not know, for years, what he was hiding from. He only knew the mountain, the cave, the goat's milk, the sound of shields. He knew Rhea only in fragments, visits that had to be brief, careful, disguised as nothing more than a mother checking on distant kin. There is a version of this story where Zeus grew up angry, aware from childhood exactly what had been done to his brothers and sisters, burning with purpose from his earliest memories. There is another version, the one that feels more true to how growing up actually works, where Zeus grew up simply as a child grows up, curious, restless, slowly beginning to understand that the guards outside his cave weren't ordinary protection, that the secrecy around his birth wasn't ordinary caution, slowly understanding that somewhere beyond the mountain, a father he had never met was still ruling a golden age built on top of 5 swallowed children, 1 stone, and a lie that had worked perfectly for years. The golden age Cronus ruled did not know it was standing on borrowed time. Crops still grew without struggle. Rivers still ran clear. Mortals still lived their peaceful, unhurried lives, unaware that the god who protected their peace had built it by destroying his own family, one birth at a time. Cronus, for his part, believed the danger had passed. He had swallowed 6 children in total, or so he believed. The prophecy, as far as he understood it, had been answered. He ruled without fear now, the terror of his early reign fading into the comfortable confidence of a king who believes he has already won. He did not know that the stone sitting inside him wasn't a child at all. He did not know that somewhere on a mountain in Crete, growing stronger and more curious every year, was exactly the thing he had spent his entire reign trying to prevent. Zeus grew into a young man the way mountains shape a person, slowly and permanently. Whatever softness might have come from an ordinary upbringing was replaced instead by something harder, forged in secrecy and the constant awareness that his life had already been a target before he'd taken a single breath of free air. He was patient in a way that would define the rest of his story. Even as a young god discovering the scope of what had been done to him, he did not rush toward vengeance the moment he understood it. He understood, somehow even young, that acting from fear alone was exactly what had made his father the thing he'd become. So before Zeus ever moved against Cronus, he did something else first. He went looking for his mother. Rhea had spent years watching her children disappear, one after another, powerless to stop any of it. When Zeus finally came to her, grown and capable, she had one request for the son she'd been allowed to save: free his brothers and sisters, undo what Cronus had done. Zeus agreed without hesitation. But freeing 5 swallowed gods from inside a titan wasn't something brute strength alone could accomplish. Cronus was still Cronus, the same titan who had ended his own father's reign, the same god who had ruled through an age of total peace by sheer force of will. A direct assault this early, with allies still uncertain and a war not yet begun, would have been suicide. So Zeus turned to someone else: Metis. Metis was a Titaness, daughter of Oceanus and Tethys, and by nearly every account the cleverest being in existence at that time. Cunning in a way that outmatched even the gods who would come to fear her intelligence later. She did not offer Zeus an army. She offered him a plan that required no war at all, at least not yet. Together, they prepared a potion, something that would force Cronus's body to reject everything he had swallowed. Disguised as a cupbearer, or in some versions simply presenting the drink through Rhea's hand, Zeus made his way into his father's presence. The son Cronus never knew he had failed to kill, standing directly in front of him, offering a drink meant to undo a decade of certainty. Cronus drank it. What followed wasn't gentle. Racked with violent sickness, Cronus vomited up everything he had swallowed years before, beginning with the stone that had once fooled him into thinking the threat was gone, and ending with his 5 living children, fully grown, exactly as they would have been had they lived freely all along. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all of them alive, all of them furious. For the first time, Cronus faced not helpless infants, but 5 grown gods who remembered exactly what had been done to them, even if the memory came in a strange, disorienting rush of an existence spent entirely inside their father. This should have been the end of the story, a tyrant defeated by trickery instead of war, his children freed, a clean and satisfying ending. It wasn't. Cronus did not surrender his throne. He turned instead to the other titans, his siblings, the same generation that had once helped him overthrow Uranus a lifetime ago, and rallied them to his side. Not every titan agreed to fight for him. Some, like Themis, remained neutral, unwilling to take a side in a war between father and son that they had watched brewing for years. A few, most notably Prometheus, would eventually side with Zeus entirely, sensing which way the future was already turning, choosing foresight over loyalty to his own generation. But most titans stood with Cronus, unwilling to see the old order fall a second time in their lifetime, unwilling to hand power to gods who hadn't even existed a generation ago. And so began the Titanomachy, the war between the titans and the young gods who would eventually be called Olympians, a war that would last 10 years, shaking the earth itself, splitting mountains, and reshaping the world in ways mortals would spend centuries trying to explain through myth and metaphor. For years, neither side gained any real advantage. The Titans were ancient, seasoned by an age before Zeus had even been conceived, powerful in ways the young gods were still only beginning to understand about themselves. The young gods were strong, undeniably strong, but few in number, still discovering the true weight of the power they each carried, still learning to fight not as individuals but as something like a family, however strange and newly reunited that family was. Zeus needed something more than strength or numbers. He needed allies no one else had thought to free. Deep beneath the earth, in the endless dark of Tartarus, three kinds of beings had been imprisoned since long before Zeus's birth. Not by Cronus, by Uranus generations earlier, the same Uranus who had feared his own children enough to bury them alive in the body of their mother. The Cyclopes, the hundred-handed ones, the very same beings whose birth had once terrified an entire generation of gods. Left to rot in darkness for longer than most stories can even measure, forgotten by everyone except the earth herself, who had never stopped grieving them. Zeus went to Tartarus himself. He walked into the darkness that had swallowed generations of the unwanted and the feared, and he did something no god before him had thought to do. He asked for their help instead of their fear. The Cyclopes, grateful beyond measure and brilliant in ways that had never been given the chance to matter, forged gifts for Zeus and his siblings unlike anything that had existed before in the history of the world. For Zeus, a thunderbolt, capable of striking with the raw, unrelenting force of the sky itself, a weapon that would come to define him more than any throne ever could. For Poseidon, a trident master's tool for a god who would come to rule every sea and every current beneath it. For Hades, a helm of invisibility, allowing the god who would rule the dead to move unseen even among other gods. A fitting gift for someone who would spend eternity in a realm the living could never fully witness. The hundred-handed ones, each possessing 50 heads and 100 arms, joined the war directly, no longer prisoners but soldiers fighting for the family that had finally chosen to see them as more than something to fear. They hurled boulders by the hundreds in a single motion, a force the Titans, for all their ancient power, had simply never had to face before. The tide of the war began, slowly and then all at once, to turn. Zeus, wielding the thunderbolt for the first time in true battle, matched entire formations of Titans in single, devastating confrontations, lightning splitting the sky in ways that mortals below would later swear had reshaped the very geography of the world. The tide of the war began, slowly and then all at once, to turn. Zeus, wielding the thunderbolt for the first time in true battle, matched entire formations of Titans in single, devastating confrontations, lightning splitting the sky in ways that mortals below would later swear had reshaped the very geography of the world. Poseidon shattered the earth itself with his trident, opening chasms that swallowed Titan forces whole, the ground beneath ancient feet giving way to depths no one had prepared for. Hades moved unseen through enemy lines, invisible and inevitable, striking from directions no army could anticipate or defend against. 10 years of war did not end gradually. It ended violently, in a final confrontation so immense that later poets would describe sky and sea and earth all crying out together, unable to tell victor from vanquished in the sheer chaos of it. Mountains crumbling, rivers boiling, the entire world seeming to hold its breath at once. But when the dust and fire finally settled, Zeus and his siblings had won. Cronus and the Titans who had chosen to fight beside him were defeated, not killed. Gods rarely die so simply, their existence too woven into the fabric of the world to simply end, but imprisoned instead, sealed away in Tartarus, the very same prison that had once held the Cyclopes and the hundred-handed ones for generations. The cycle Cronus had once escaped by ending his own father's reign now closed around him completely, a fitting and merciless kind of justice that not even Zeus had fully planned for. The world Zeus inherited afterward wasn't handed to him on a throne someone else had built. It was constructed, piece by piece, from 10 years of war, from 5 siblings freed by trickery instead of force, and from beings his own family's previous generation had left to rot in darkness out of nothing more than fear. He did not become king because destiny demanded it. He became king because he had been patient enough to plan instead of rushing toward vengeance. Humble enough to ask beings everyone else feared for their help instead of leaving them buried. Brave enough to free the very monsters an entire generation before him had been too afraid to even look at directly. Everyone remembers Zeus as the king who rules from golden Olympus, thunderbolt in hand, unquestioned authority over gods and mortals alike. No one remembers that he only got there by refusing to repeat his father's mistake, by trusting the very beings his family had spent generations being taught to fear. But even kings who learn from the past aren't free from it forever, because somewhere, far in Zeus's own future, another prophecy is already waiting to be spoken. And history, as it turns out, has a habit of asking the very same question twice, no matter how many gods have already answered it once before.